Yeah.
Yeah.
So people doing comments?
They can.
If people log into the thing.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Dennis Bevington. I'm been the Member of Parliament here for my 10th year. And I'm always pleased to have a constituency meeting, and it's always great to have a constituency meeting when a lot of people show up. I'm glad to be here in the Tree of Peace Friendship Center and to share in supporting this organization, which has done so much for communities right across Canada and so much for people in the north as well. So it's great to be here, and we have a wonderful facility here that we certainly need to support in every way going forward, and hopefully after the next election we'll see even more support for friendship centers across this country. I'm also pleased to be here on the traditional territory of the Olnec-Dene. And in the future, perhaps as the remaining claims in the Northwest Territories are settled, including this one, that we'll see that the opportunities will improve for all the citizens of the North, and especially for the First Nations with their inherent rights and their ownership of land and their historic ownership of the territory that we share. We've got interesting night tonight because this the focus of this meeting is building sustainable communities and lifestyles. This idea, I think, started. I think it really started with the people of the North who across the North have taken on many different aspects of this. Traditional people, traditional practices that guided them through centuries and centuries of living off the land comfortably. So sustainability is something that the North knows about. Perhaps is not as visible today in our modern society, but it is something that I think brings people together and brings an excitement to the consideration of life here in the North. My interest in this started really in examining this issue, started with some statistics over the last decade of intensive industrial activity in the Northwest Territories, with one of the highest GDP rates in the country. We saw our population decline. It's something that's the reality of the situation. When I contracted with a little company here to look at the cost of living in the North and income, what we found over that 10-year period was that in many cases, poverty rates in small communities, even close to the industrial development, the poverty rates increased. The high-end income increased as well, but the high-end income had no place to go in the communities. So what we saw was this differentiation of income. Many people that earned more money, but many people that were falling further behind. There is no, for many of our communities, there is no return in the community for those that earn income. There's nothing to buy, no services that others provide. Everything is imported. So we have a situation where our societies and our communities are definitely suffering. And when we look at the statistics of health, longevity in the northern regions of Canada, we know that those are things of great concern to us. We need to find ways to make those statistics turn around. I had a great dialogue with an MLA on this subject, Bob Bromley, and he's here tonight, and I'll get him to speak in a bit. But we decided that we would start off looking at this issue of sustainability, because we said the way things are going is not sustainable. We're not creating a society that's sustainable here, and we're not focusing on, government's not focusing on, media's not focusing on the kinds of things that people can do here that can make a difference. So, about a year ago, we decided we would do a survey. We accomplished that last fall. That survey we'll talk about later, but that looked at the opinions of Northerners about sustainability, and we saw a great deal of support for it. And we saw, and I think everybody does see when we travel around, that there are people who are working on sustainability right now. And exciting, many of you here may be attending the forum on sustainability in the next 2 days, and many of you are engaged in sustainability practices. So, well, this is an opportunity as well to dialogue on those things. We sent out invitations to participate in the survey to many stakeholders, many organizations, and we got a good response. Half the people responded to us. These are fairly detailed survey results, and they were quite good. There are copies here, and it's available online. So out of that, our further plans were to have an opportunity for people to get together and start to talk about how to promote the sustainability that we see evident in the minds of people, in the actions of people throughout the North. What's replicable, what makes sense, what kinds of things can move ahead. So we've got that forum going ahead tomorrow, and that's very exciting. It's the first time that we've had this kind of public event in the Northwest Territories focusing on sustainability, and I think this is going to be a very good thing. I hope that everyone here can take time to participate in this forum going ahead tomorrow. This is a constituency meeting. I will take questions later on any subject you have, and certainly that's part of my job as a member of Parliament is to hear what you have to say, to be able to represent you as well as I can. But it's also my job to encourage the things that I see as important, and I do see this as important. What we're doing here is what Ecology North is going to carry forward as the organizer of the forum. The people that have come, organizations that have helped to sponsor the forum that's going ahead tomorrow have said, yes, this is important. So I really see that this is something that has great value. So that's my opening statement to you. This meeting is going to be, we'll have statements from a couple other people, then we have our guest speakers here tonight, and I'll introduce them as we go along. But now I'd like to ask Bob Bromley if he could get up and say a few words about his process here. I know it's painful for you, Bob.
He's somebody who could wheel you up here, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis, and I want to thank you for your openness and partnering with me as we talk about these things. But I think we both realized very early on that we were really simply reflecting the interest that's out there and the things that were already happening. And we thought, how us thinking even further. So that's been great. We know that healthy communities are something that everybody wants. Healthy families, healthy communities. That's what we're looking for here. And every community needs to have that goal, needs to be supported in that goal, large and small. I think all our communities across the north, not relatively Yellowknife are small, but Yellowknife will not do well if those communities are not healthy and up and running and feel good about themselves, and vice versa as well. I think healthy Yellowknife and your work to nail down benefits that feed throughout the territory is important for all of our communities as well. So we have a real opportunity, and I see a lot of representation here from all over the north. So kudos to you, Dennis, for pulling this together. I've known one of our speakers and heard about both of our speakers here tonight for some time. I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. I know that they've been delving into this professionally and will share some very interesting thoughts. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. I think the next 2 days, we thought, let's not just report back on the result of the survey, let's develop some detailed discussions. And I believe that in organizing the process and the speakers, just about everybody said they wanted to speak. It was such a positive, and that's because there's so much out there that people are doing and love to report on. Report on the challenges, report on the successes, and then others as well. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of days, as well as this evening.
Thanks, Bob. And another person that I'd like to introduce now and give him a chance to make a statement, of course, is our Dene National Chief, Bill Erasmus, who really represents the combined political direction of the communities, the First Nations communities in the Northwest Territories, and their positive desire for change, and their positive strength for the environment. Their leadership is something that is invaluable to the people of the North. It's, over the years, for sensible, practical care for the environment, the First Nations of the Northwest Territories have been leadership right across this country. They've been fighting for their rights, and they've been fighting for everyone's rights. Only by standing up for their rights can they protect everyone else's rights. And so I think it's a strength that is in this territory, and it's also, for all of us, it's a relationship to the land, the people that have lived here for thousands of years. Those are things that we've come to cherish in the North. All of us, we all cherish that. We all cherish the idea of what the First Nations have accomplished here. So we all, if we could maybe have a few opening statements there. Sure.
I don't need a mic, do
And that one's a bit quiet,
I?
but
That'll pick it up, right?
yeah, we can do that.
Is this being webcast?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you to Dennis and Ecology North and the other entities that are putting on this event tonight and for the next couple of days. I'm actually supposed to be on the agenda in the morning, and I won't be able to make it in the morning, but I'll be at the session for the next couple of days off and on. So I wanted to make a couple of comments tonight. To me, I think this issue is so important that we can't miss this opportunity to speak out. And the reason I say that is because there's so little public dialogue and discussion that's taking place in this country that I think we have to take the lead. And I want to just comment quickly. I don't want to speak too much, but so much that needs to be said. The comment that you made, Dennis, that settling the land ownership is so important because the sooner you settle, then the sooner you get economic stability, which then of course leads to political stability. And the fact that some people are afraid that First Nations issues are not positive things really means that we need to talk and work these issues out amongst ourselves. And so I wanted to thank Dennis for making that comment and also Bob for his endless work that I think really helps people, especially people in Yellowknife. Bob and I both grew up here, and we've had a chance to see how Yellowknife has changed. And his comment that if the small communities' economies are not strong, then Yellowknife is not strong, and that's so important and so true. And I know that there are many people that are excited that there's a new government south of us in Alberta. The NDP have gotten in, and that means there has to be changes downstream to us. And there's an opportunity here for us to work with Alberta. Alberta used to be part of the Northwest Territories until 1905. And I think we need to encourage this kind of dialogue to go south so that the NDP and Alberta take the lead and develop an energy plan, for example, because there is no plan in the north, there's no plan anywhere in the south, there's no plan in Canada. There is no energy plan, there's really no economic plan. And if we could think in terms of developing that so it is sustainable, as you say, and it does include the local communities, it does include the Denny economy of hunting, trapping, and fishing, providing options for young people, because not everyone wants to go to university, but some guys might want to trap, and they might want to be fishermen, and they'll need help, because that's a small business. And if we could develop it that way, I think we go a long ways. A lot of people now are I think, also convinced, and Premier Nocte said this in her opening remarks, which we need to get away from the boom and bust economy. That's what Alberta is. It's booming, but it's going to bust. And she knows that there has to be diversification. And I've had the opportunity as being chief of the Denny Nation to travel a lot. And what I've seen is that, especially when I'm out of the country and people ask me where I'm from, and I tell them I'm from Yellowknife, and they know that it's northern Canada, they're excited because they think of the fresh air, they think of the environment, and they think of all of the wonderful things that we have here. But we have not learned how to be good recipients of tourism or of tourists. I really think we need to focus on that because for example, we get 7,000 to 10,000 Japanese every year. And that's just Japanese from Japan. They come to Yellowknife. And we really are not good guests to the Japanese. I don't think. And I'm thinking of First Nations, we have not really put our arms up to them. We have not really gotten involved in that. And the possibilities of that growth in tourism. There's a few individuals that have benefited from it. But we haven't really thought it out, because if we were smart, we'd have the Japanese come to Yellowknife, and we'd have them go to Norman Wells, because that's where all the planes go. And then we'd have them, we'd do something there, because that's a Satu region, and the local people there could take care of them for a day or two or whatever, part of the package. And then they could go to Inuvik, up to the Wichin area, the Nunavut area, and also the local people there could have a package for them. And they could either swing back, or they could go around the White Horse, or to the Yukon, and then back to the south. But we don't do that. We're here in Yellowknife, and we just take them, and they're gone back south. So we're not thinking, we haven't got to the point yet where we're really developing that potential that's there, and I really think that we need to start thinking about it, and so that it's sustainable and we really benefit from it. And tourism, I know in a lot of ways that our people can be okay with it. I remember as a kid, my mother used to really kind of dread the tourists that used to come around, because they came right in our backyard and were taking pictures of my mother catching fish or making dry fish or whatever. And she'd tell us to shoo them away. But in today's world, you can control the tourists because they buy a package. And you take them where you want them, and they see what you want them to see. So we need to understand that, and we need to capitalize on that. I get some notes. Those are some of the points I wanted to make. I think that the fact that, again, getting back to public involvement, getting back to people talking, and people communicating with one another, I really think we have an opportunity here, and it's prime too, because we've got elections coming up. Territorial elections, federal elections. We have many elections in our communities, including my own in July. And it forces us to be accountable. It forces us to get the issues out and to do the right thing so that it has sustainability. So, again, I want to thank everyone who was here, who was listening and taking this and helping you take it to the right place so that we able to propose that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill, and those are all thoughts that fit with the program that we're going to go through over the next couple of days, and I hope that you'll have a chance to sit in on various sessions. There's going to be some very interesting topics, and as Bob pointed out, these are people from the north, and our two special guests here are really the only two special guests we have. But I want to say one thing about those two special guests. These are the first two special guests from Alberta since the Alberta election, and they're bringing this new message from Alberta to the Northwest Territories. So isn't that something? And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, that there's going to be a different message from Alberta. And Alberta plays a big role in the Northwest Territories. We can't deny that. If we do, that would be foolhardy for us to deny that there's a big relationship that goes on between the Northwest Territories and its very powerful southern neighbor. So here's something different coming on for the Northwest Territories and for all of us here. And at Ms. Nodley's victory speech, I was pleased to see that Chief Alan Adams was there on the stage. But that, I don't think, would have occurred with any of the other parties winning the election. And it spoke volumes about what changes are likely to take place. And for many of us, I'm a little older than 44 years, but many of us have lived in where we viewed Alberta just simply in one way. We just viewed it in one direction. And that was really, you know, that's the nature of the politics there. It's not the nature of the society there. And I think that's something that happens when you have these dynasties in place. It appears that that's what the whole place is about, but it isn't. And I think that's a great, there's a great opportunity to balance our impressions and our needs from Alberta and what we can offer them as well. Because we are a very progressive culture in the Northwest Territories. There's no, I don't, you know, there's very few places that have our degree of understanding between First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and the rest of us. I mean, there's not. This is something that we have grown ourselves, and I've grown up with it as a child as well. I can remember how different it was, and I know where we've come to today, and it's amazing. Well, sometimes we don't look at it that way because we're just living our lives. But if you actually step back and take a look at it, it's impressive, and we should all take some pride in that. I was going to start next with the survey findings and just kind of run through them for you. We all have copies of them. I mean, the participants of the survey were a whole variety of people from across the north. Their interest was so strong in sustainable community practices, food, focusing mainly on production, but processing, storage, and distribution activities were very important to everyone, because everyone knows that it's not just good enough to produce food. You have to be able to have it for the times when you need it. And there's so much that can be done here. I think that everyone can understand that very well. And community gardening is taking on greater functions in the north. And gee, you know, 90 years ago, the mission used to garden for all of us in the north. You know, all the gardening was done up here. So we can return there. I mean, there's real opportunities there, and I think everybody recognizes that. In renewable energy, we have a super opportunity here, and I think everybody agreed with that there's so many things to do. We'll hear more about those things, more about how we need to move ahead with those things in a logical and sensible fashion. That's part of one of the discussion groups tomorrow, and I'm sure you'll find that very interesting. Community empowerment, everybody talked about that. Communities have to be able to have the resources, the policies in place that allow them to make progress. Take one thing, for instance, in this regard. 12 years ago, we started pushing on the Power Corporation to put in a net metering process. Public Utility Board, 12 years ago, told the Power Corporation to do this. Well, it took many years to get them to do it, to actually allow people to hook solar systems into their homes. It took a major effort on the part of politicians, and you'll hear one tomorrow, and the Legislative Assembly to fight for the last 4 years. And we finally today have a net metering policy which can stand with any net metering policy anywhere in the country. So we did that. There's no other northern territory that has it. We have it now. And so that's what community empowerment is about. What are the rules that people have to govern themselves by? What are the rules that make up the economic relationships? So that's a very interesting section. That'll be on Saturday. And we've got some very interesting people that are dealing with that. So there's much else in the survey. It factors in the high cost of living, actions to reduce that high cost of living, interesting subject, how to deal with culture and tradition, enhanced by modern technology. Like, how do we move ahead? How do we keep our young people engaged in their culture and tradition with all the modern technologies they have now? Can it actually fuse together into something that allows people to progress? Some of those answers are going to come from young people as well as from us. I mean, we all know that the average 3-year-old has better computer skills than many of us 60-year-olds. And I can attest to that with my grandchildren. So the survey, I'd recommend people read it, look at it. It's part of what will be discussed over the next 2 days. Maybe not exactly the same, but it gives you the flavor of what is that people want us to accomplish with this type of gathering. So having said that, and we'll open that up to questions later, but right now I'd like to introduce our special guests from Alberta, the first sustainable development voices that we've heard from Alberta in a long time. And Diane Gibson, she's worked internationally and nationally on economic and public policy issues ranging from energy to healthcare and trade, as well as the social impacts of resource extraction. He's a social commentator and a researcher with over 20 years of experience and has been on faculty with Capilano College and the University of Alberta. Her work is always solutions focused, and she's founded 2 successful co-ops. And a director of a provincial think tank, co-authored and authored many publications. So she's a woman that has done many things in this field. So we're very glad to have her here today. And David Thompson is the director of Sustainable Communities for Sustainable Prosperity, and he's principal of Policy Link Research and Consulting, an Edmonton-based public policy consultancy. He's worked as a lawyer in government and in the civil society sector and management, as well as a small business owner and a researcher and organizational development consultant. So, to the 2 of you, the new voice of Alberta, I'll bring that other mic over.
Both of these, this one's a little share. We'll share. We're good at sharing. So, should we start with
We should start. We have a confession. We have a confession to make. We moved to BC from Alberta. I'm an Alberta girl. It's in my soul. And my mom's actually here tonight, Nancy Gibson. She works up here in the north. That's just my sister. So I have a real attachment to prairie and northern climes. But our successful co-op got successful, and its head office got based in Victoria, and we had to go out and be management last year. So I missed the winter terribly. And as nobody on the coast recognizes it, like, oh, you must be so glad to be here from Alberta. I'm looking at it, are you kidding? It's raining and there's no snow. I feel like I'm missing part of my soul.
And
But
then
anyway,
the election happened.
And then the election happened and we weren't there. But it's a great honor for us to be here today and to be able to speak to sustainable community and local development. And we've worked quite a bit with Ecology North and Alternatives North over the years on reports around revenue options and budgets. And I've worked also in Newfoundland and Labrador and specialize a bit in focusing on resource economies and looking at alternatives. And I know you guys have heard this mantra, but in Alberta it was shoved at us so much that there is no alternative to oil and gas. That this economic engine is all we get. And that we had the best we could do is harness some of that revenue to try to eke out some corners for the local economy or sustainable economy. And that without this economic engine, and there was always this sort of threat of investment strike in Alberta by the oil and gas sector, that if we did anything to change the royalty structure, the investment climate, the tax structure, that they would leave. And always feeling like we were being a little bit held to ransom. And so it's really exciting for us to be here today to speak to alternatives, and that's really what we're all about. And that there is an alternative. There are alternative economies that already exist in the North, viable, strong alternative economies, and to be able to highlight some of those and talk about the political choices around how you build and structure economies and what those trade-offs really are.
My turn? Yeah, so a bit more about that move to BC. So, you know, we didn't really think that what happened in Alberta was possible, and we'll get back to that. But yeah, so so yeah, thanks very much for having us. As Di mentioned, we've done some work with the organizations she mentioned, and also with the Union of Northern Workers, and gotten to know a few of you over the years, and participated in some discussions, sort of like this one, and really been impressed by how engaged people are here. And I guess that was coming from Alberta, where maybe there isn't quite as much engagement, or there wasn't quite as much engagement, and possibly there is more now. So we're really happy to be here and to help along with all of you, kick off the conversation that's going to be happening over the next couple days, and maybe even boost the conversation that's happening outside of the conference for the next couple days. It sounds like all of the people who've spoken so far have spoken about the need for a bigger conversation and to really talk these topics through and develop the options and the alternatives. So it's a pleasure to be a part of that. It's a real honor for us. And so we were sent an agenda, which I'll just let you know what it is that we were asked to speak to, because I found it an interesting description. So we were to bring our experience in economic and policy issues together with our work in community and social development to connect the dots around climate, environmental, political, and economic change, ways to rethink priorities and draw on traditions of sustainable local economies to provide a path forward for this and future generations. So I had a look at that, and I thought, for a couple minutes, I thought, yeah, we're going to nail this. This is going to be so easy. So we will. And now I'm done, and I can.
That's all you got?
That's what I got. Yeah, so actually, you know, I think the good news is, though, that the folks in this room and the folks in the conference for the next couple of days are going to nail that. We've got 4 really interesting panels coming in the next couple of days, some really interesting speakers. We had the chance to very quickly chat with some of them tonight before this event started, and the depth of knowledge on the topics that are coming over the next couple of days is really impressive. We're quite happy to be listening for a lot of that. And we thought we would just talk about a few themes that are in the conference tonight, and for each of them, talk about some of the trends that we see in Canada and the wider world, and how that might relate to sustainable local economies and paths forward. And just, you know, we're not going to go deep tonight. We're not going to cover the amount of knowledge that's happening. It's going to be discussed in the next couple of days. But if we can help to, get people buzzing a little bit about these topics, we'll consider that a big success. So do you want to kick it off?
So we're launching a conversation, really, and we hope that tonight will be a bit of a conversation as well. I want to acknowledge the folks online. I'm not sure how many folks we have. 2. Well,
so far.
Welcome. And please feel free. I know that you can engage and comment and participate from online, so please do feel welcome to engage. So the kind of major themes out of that introductory paragraph that we had of our behemoth task for tonight, we pulled 3 themes, sort of climate and environment, economic, and political. And so those are the 3 areas we're sort of going to look at some of the changes we see in the global and political environments that might be important for contextualizing the conversation for the next couple of days. We'll start with the climate and environment. One of the changes I'm sure that you're all aware of, it's in the news a lot lately, is the new technologies that are becoming available that make renewable energy more accessible, more affordable, and more viable. And certainly there's exciting changes happening that are making that a more real option. Certainly some of that was already real and just not realized, but it is making it more accessible.
And so one of the, this will be one of the themes that gets discussed tomorrow. And I was lucky to speak with Jack before tonight's presentation about some of the trends that are happening out there, and Di mentioned some of them about the price of renewable energy coming way down. I'm not going to give away the interesting graphs that are happening tomorrow, but and use and adoption of renewables starting to head way up, and this is happening globally as well as in Canada, and I would think here, and it's something that's going to be coming soon. And when it comes to environmental issues, I mean, my background is in environment, and I worked in the field for 25 years or something like that. And I started out as a trees and bunnies guy, somebody who's thought, you know, these bunnies are cute and the trees are nice and I like trees. But as time has gone on, I've come to be a bit more of a civilization kind of guy when it comes to the environment, in the recognition that the types of environmental problems that we're creating today are the types that end civilizations, not the types we just the bunny sad. And that's a bit disturbing if you like our current civilization. And I personally have some issues with our current civilization. I think that we don't do a great job with equality, with inclusion, with status of women. I think that we've got a lot of gaps. At the same time, I think that there's other things that I do like about it, like I like the cell phone, I like the internet, vaporizers, mangoes, roads, hospitals, education, and drinking water and having a lifespan of over 30 years. So these are the kinds of things that our civilization enables. And we're not likely to do better on inclusion and all those other issues I mentioned earlier if we don't have these ones. So it's kind of an important project, I think, the environmental project and the climate change project. And how do we connect this to sustainable local economies and paths going forward? Well, I think the first thing to realize is, and this was discussed earlier, is that sustainable local economies generally have been sustainable. I mean, the ones that we can observe now, the ones that weren't sustainable are gone, right? They've just disappeared, and archaeology is our way to look at those ones. And sustainable local economies live off of the interest, not off the capital. Everybody knows that. They use the renewable resources and a few non-renewable resources, but they don't rely on just extraction of non-renewable resources. They invest in their longevity. They don't undermine their foundations. And basically the types of interventions that they have in the natural world are aimed at increasing productivity and increasing the sustainability of the resource. So if you look at clam gardens on the coasts of Canada and elsewhere, here are some practices that have been happening for thousands of years where the sand on the beaches gets turned over, terrace walls get built, and the productivity of the clam gardens and clam harvests goes way up And that's the kind of intervention that a successful society has when it interacts with the environment to extract its resources. Similar thing with controlled burns in wooded areas. They've been happening for thousands of years. First Nations people in Canada and elsewhere have interacted with their environment in a way that increases the productivity of the environment. There's no kind of pristine wilderness in Canada or anywhere else. I think we've kind of gotten over that view of nature. And I think that these are the kinds of practices we need to look at in talking about local economies. And what are the lessons that these types of practices give us?
Well, just to say that there's local economies and there's local economies, and if you want to build sustainable local economies, then the best way to make them sustainable is to have them be truly bottom up, is to have them be people who are attached to the local environment, care about living there, and plan to be there in the long term. And that's the kind of economic development that won't be about resource extraction and then leave. It'll be about sustainable growth for people who plan for them and their next generation to be there. And we'll be thinking multi-generation instead of short-term extraction. So for sustainability, it's about really looking at that bottom-up grassroots economic development, building on strengths.
Yeah, and when it comes to paths forward, and here's where we get into what we hope will be conversation helpers or conversation starters that are going to be discussed over the next couple of days, and hopefully outside of that. We just came up with a few ideas, definitely not a comprehensive list, and we won't be going into the depth that you guys will be able to go into. We thought we would just suggest a few. So I mean, I just wanted to reiterate that this is kind of an imperative. It's not only a priority, but it's an imperative for local economies to be operating in a way that enhances the resources instead of extracting and depleting non-renewable resources. So some of the ideas, you've probably heard a lot of these before, probably all of them, but at the territorial and national or federal level, we need to be talking about removing fossil fuel subsidies. Now, there's a lot of depth in that conversation, of course, but what we have now is a system that subsidizes fossil fuels, and that basically subsidizes a way of living that is dependent on long-distance transportation, as opposed to local economy, that makes it cheaper to run an import and an export-oriented economy than it would be to have a local economy with local trade and local employment and community priorities driving the economy. Now, fossil fuel subsidies are important in keeping the cost of living down. There are ways to deal with that too. You can take the fossil fuel subsidies and basically give them money to people who need it instead. So, you know, you have a choice here. Do you want to be providing cheap gas to everyone, or do you want to be providing money to everyone and let them choose whether to spend it on gas, or to spend it on food, or their kids' education, or clothing, or traditional activities, or any of the other priorities that those people might have? It seems kind of silly to me to tell people you're going to spend it on gasoline, and that's the only choice you have. So if we're going to be throwing money at the problem, let's throw it in the right direction, a direction that respects people's choices, that gives them choices, and it doesn't help to undermine our local sustainable economies. So that's one. Related to that, carbon pricing. It's hard to talk about that and not think about Doug. But we need to think about the external, jump into jargon here.
Yeah, being the economist right now.
Sorry. Basically, lots of fossil fuel burning ends up with lots of pollution, and the people who pay the price for pollution are generally poor. Pollution happens where people live, and poor people suffer disproportionately from it, but we all suffer from it as well. And carbon pricing can help reduce that amount, the amount of that pollution, and make sure that the people who are actually causing it actually pay for it. And that's just a sort of an example of the polluter pay principle generally. And the thinking is, why should anybody other than the person who's doing the polluting pay for it? So these are some of the sort of territorial level policy changes and federal level policy changes that can help support local economies. There's what we call a policy alignment between those types of policy changes and the types of local economic development that you can see as a result.
So there's two things in there. One is taking that playing field, which is currently balanced in favor of fossil fuel extraction, and rebalancing it, at least to level it, if not rebalance it in favor of sustainable development. And that's about how you are, what you're subsidizing and how you're subsidizing it. Even our education system is a bit of a hidden subsidy towards fossil fuel extraction and big business. Because, for example, the university has this massive faculty of business. And it's not teaching development of cooperatives, it's not teaching how to foster local entrepreneurship in rural communities, in remote communities. It's not teaching how to build traditional economies. It's not teaching, like Chief Erasmus said, it's not teaching people who don't want to go to school but have great skill sets how to be able to engage in their own small businesses. There's so many things that we're not teaching in an education system that's skewed towards big business and industry that's oriented towards fossil fuel extraction. Go ahead.
Well, it's really important to remember too that most poorest countries in the world are the oil-producing countries. And that's exactly what's happening to Alberta. They're destroying the environment there, and eventually it's going to be just like. Then everybody says, "Well, what about Saudi Arabia?" There's only a few people there that have money. Most of the people are very poor and suffering. Look at Rapids, the desert area, and all of Africa and South America, wherever they produce oil. Then they're the poorest countries in the world, the ones that produce the oil.
The petrostate. Yeah, the petrostate. And I think it was mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if it was you, Dennis, that mentioned that inequality as you see the resource economy. The gap, I mean, Alberta had the biggest gap between women and men's incomes and earnings, and the biggest inequality in the nation. When you see those gaps in resource economy become massive. But we can go into that, I think we're going into that next, actually. We might get an opportunity to move into the economy, which you might think we've already been talking only economy, but we're economists, and that's their language. But on the economic debate, one of those issues is the what I call smokestack chasing. So the model of economic development that is about lower taxes and trying to attract business from outside. And so chasing the smokestack is about bringing in external investors to your resources. And I'm not sure the extent to which the NWT suffers from this, but Alberta and certainly the federal government under Stephen Harper suffer from a colonial mentality of we're lucky they're here. It's an old feeling we have of this hinterland mentality that we have of, we're lucky they want our resources. We're so lucky they're coming. Let's give them away and thank them for taking our resources. And it's, Stephen Harper talks about being an energy superpower, but I still see him behaving as a colony, as somebody who feels lucky anyone's even interested at all, and not as an energy superpower. So it's that smokestack chasing, and the alternative, which I've been reading about lately, and I love this term, I don't know how many of you heard it, is economic gardening. Has anyone heard the term? No? So the idea is that you foster your own local economic development by building on what you've got in your backyard. So that would be in the NWT economy. What are the strengths? So it's arts and culture, it's traditional economy, it's the hunting and trapping. Chief Erasmus mentioned the fishing. All the things we're going to be talking about in the next few days is gardening is taking what you've got in the way of strengths and fostering them, fueling them, feeding them, fertilizing them so that they can grow. So instead of chasing smokestacks from outside, it's about gardening your own economy in-house, and moving away from being heroes of wood and jars of water. You had another economic.
I was going to talk about guano. How about people know about guano?
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of
you know, yeah, people chase smokestacks and they chase guano.
Does anybody
guano-
here not know what guano is?
Well, there must
Bat-
be a few people who don't know what guano is.
Bat
It's
poop.
Bat poop. And so in Chile and Peru, there was quite the industry in harvesting bat poop. And it was used as an agricultural fertilizer. It was good at that. And the problem was, though, that a lot of countries started spending inordinate amounts of energy focusing on guano exports, and fell into the trap that so many colonies have fallen into of pursuing a single export. And while guano was the thing, they did well. But as we know now, guano isn't the thing. We've got other types of fertilizer, and those economies basically went through the floor as soon as that happened. And the types of smokestack chasing that is happening in so many places in Canada right now make one think about that. Are we chasing right now? Are we chasing the next guano? If renewable energy prices keep going on that downward trend, when does oil and when does gas become guano? And there's some interesting discussion of this in the sort of the global mainstream commentary sphere. We've been talking about the world going through what's called a commodity super cycle for the last 10 years, where commodity prices have just been going up and up and up, with some fluctuations at certain periods of time, but it's been going up for quite a while. A lot of the economists are now saying that the commodity super cycle is coming to an end for a number of reasons. One being oversupply, because the prices have been so high for so long that it's attracted a lot of production. Another being perhaps a bit of a slowdown in the level of growth that happens that's been happening in China and India and BRIC countries and other up-and-comers. So are we, is Canada, is the Northwest Territories heading down a path where we're going to be investing a lot and spending a lot of time and money and finding ourselves holding on to a resource that's no longer anywhere near as valuable as we thought it was. Another trend here, another economic change that's worth thinking about is that the types of exports we've been focusing on, we're not the only place that has this stuff. Like we're looking at building liquid natural gas export plants in BC and putting up a whole lot of pipelines through a whole lot of First Nations territories, building these big plants on the edge of the ocean to liquefy natural gas, send it overseas, and the folks overseas are actually drilling for natural gas. So, you know, putting all your eggs in the smokestack or guano basket may not be the best strategy. And one of the great strengths of local economic development is the diversity. You know, boy, we all get told this, don't we, in our retirement planning? Make sure you're diversifying. Like, why would you not run a country that way, or a territory that way? Why would you think put all these in the basket? Anyways, that was my little spiel about guano. I don't get to talk about guano very much.
There you go. Economic gardening and guano.
By the way, you know, thank you very much for the for raising your hand and offering some comments. If anybody would like to interrupt us, please feel free. Especially if you want to talk about guano. But
There's a couple of other economic trends we were thinking were worth highlighting for context, particularly with relation to NWT right now, and that's the mainstreaming of the inequality debate, and that was raised in terms of the petro-state concept, but the inequality and the fact there's become mainstream recognition about the fact that it's not just bad for people. We know it's bad for people, the people that are in the lower income levels. We know that, there was that great book, The Spirit Level, that talked about that, negative health impacts of having broader inequality. It's bad across a broad range of indicators. Education outcomes go down, diabetes and obesity go up. Like, inequality is bad for our social determinants of health. But now we're also getting admissions that it's bad for the economy, it's bad for economic growth, from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, the TD Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Conference Board of Canada. Now, that's not a mouthful of names I get to say often in a progressive sentence, but they all are saying too much inequality is bad for economic growth. So we are seeing a bit of a mainstreaming of that debate, and it's tied to another trend we're seeing, and that is the shift towards more progressivity in taxes and higher taxes. And I was just working on a budget report in Newfoundland, and the budget just came out, and they put 2 new tax brackets on the top end, reinstating tax progressivity, and they raised the HST, and we're talking about corporate taxes. Alberta raised taxes, now not enough. But under the PCs, before the Indies came in, under the PCs, they did start to raise taxes. So that tells you now, Northwest Territory still has a government that's holding on to the old mantra that taxes need to stay low. It's still got an anti-tax bias. There's room for more progressivity on the higher end in Northwest Territory income taxes. There's room for the federal government's been cutting corporate taxes so much that there's actually room for the territory to start raising corporate taxes and collect revenues there. There's room, another thing that's interesting, and the International Monetary Fund again came out in support of this. Australia put in a minerals tax, a tax on super profits in the minerals sector, and 30% tax on net profits. It's revenue sensitive, so it only applies after a certain revenue threshold. But the IMF came out and said, good on you to Australia for putting in a tax on profits from mineral extraction. So that tells you that there's a shift in the debate around revenue generation that allows, I think, the Northwest Territories to look at revenue room they might not have thought they had.
I was amazed to learn that Norway has a $1 trillion heritage fund.
So Norway has never been short. It's funny because in Alberta, I remember when we were talking about the royalty debate, and I put out a paper in 2007 on royalty reform, which got me audited by the university. I had to leave my mat leave early to go in for an audit after that paper on royalties. And I remember that there was one company that was saying publicly in the newspaper, we can't do this. We'll have to go to business. It'll be the end of us. And I read their annual report to investors, and it said, expect a wall of cash this year. And that's a direct quote from their annual report. So in the public and to government, they're crying poor on royalties. And in their report to investors, they were saying there's a wall of cash coming. And so they were blackmailing the government, and it wasn't real. And the revenue generation opportunities are there. So Norway is a great example where they've had a much higher revenue threshold for investors. In fact, they had an agreement at the beginning with a company coming in, and they said, you can come in on a joint partnership, but after a certain number of years, we take over and we get all your technology. And the profits were still high enough, and there was a 90% return to government on that project, that they gave them they went in and they gave them their technology. They trained them and did a full technology transfer to the Norwegian government. And so the profits are still high enough with the higher returns. Now, that isn't necessarily the case in a low oil and low gas price environment. So it's important that these instruments be structured to be sensitive to revenues for the companies, just like you would with income taxes. You structure them so that they're sensitive to size and to revenue and profits, where if the price goes back up, then the windfall profits are coming into the citizens and not to foreign shareholders.
We have to be a little careful in the Northwest Territories because, of course, we have a different revenue
Structure.
structure
Yeah.
from the government of Canada. And that does play out with a lot of our ability to deal with resources in the same way that you might in a province where there isn't that. And Newfoundland.
And some of that's changing or has changed.
Little bit.
Little
but
bit?
It's not gonna unleash a huge amount of money for us out of our resources. That's not gonna happen to us here. So in some respects, we have to look at different revenue tools.
For the
Different
tax,
ways of-
yeah, tax
Different ways
instruments.
of, well, and certainly the fossil fuel taxes on certain aspects of the fossil fuels that are used by industry are one way to collect money. There's some serious, you know, you have to be careful with how you do it up here. It's not as straightforward as in other places, and I think that's something that, well, in a way, it means that we have to move in different directions in order to accomplish our goals, and this is part of what we're, you know, and what we're after here is different directions.
And interesting, raises an interesting point in terms of how you structure the alternative economy, because another way Norway was able to capture rent was by making it publicly owned. So another big question we have to answer in the conference as we go forward is, as we build an alternative economy in terms of renewable energies and other types of economies and development, is it done as a publicly owned enterprise? Is it private for profit? Is it structured to be a cooperative, nonprofit enterprise? And especially when we're talking about energy generation, is looking at how those are designed, because what we've seen elsewhere is that ownership matters, how it's funded matters, and how it's delivered matters for sustainability and for equity. So that raises some really interesting creative solutions that the Northwest Territories can use on structuring the new economy to avoid some of those pitfalls.
Well, one of the great solutions is the First Nations in the Northwest Territories. Have the ability to hold, have the ability to collect, and have the ability to share, because they're not doing anything. Their home is here, right? So like that's what we've seen with some of the development corporations that are located here. They, you know, that's an interesting tool that we have here that is you know, has room to grow, and it does deal with resources in a way that ensures that the money stays in the territory.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it's saying besides taxes, you don't have to raise the taxes. You just have to stop the government wasting all the money. And I'm thinking about Norwegian, just a short paragraph in my figure. We do not need to sacrifice the environment for the economy as shown including the following page. It's not only practical, but extremely cost effective to establish self-sufficient, sustainable communities throughout the Northwest Territories. For example, instead of the federal and NWD government spending $5 billion on the McKenzie Valley Highway, a few $100 million could be used to make energy self-sufficiency a reality throughout the territories. A few $100 million more or less could easily be used for infrastructure to achieve food self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency in all other basic human needs could be achieved for a lot less than $5 billion and doing no harm to the environment. But all that McKenzie Valley Highway is going to do, it's going to fight the oil companies and mining companies in. It's going to kill all the caribou and wildlife. It's just totally destructive.
So in talking about leveling that playing field, that is one of the subsidies to industry is that, you know, I think it's important to be, and I think one of the conference questions we'll be asking is, are they subsidizing the infrastructure needed for this sustainable economy? So for example, if they're building highways for oil and gas, are they building access roads for the tourism operations that people want to see that are going to be sustainable? Are the kinds of community services available in the local communities that support, because we've seen that tourism and local communities go hand in hand, and the more local services you have, the more tourism you get, the more tourism you'll get, the more local services you'll have. So those two pieces, you need a certain level of local service thresholds for the tourism to be viable. So are those services going to be invested in as well? And that subsidy to fossil fuels by investing in the infrastructure. And then the other piece of that that's really important is if somebody isn't able to feed themselves today or doesn't have a house to live in today, they're not building a sustainable economy for tomorrow. And so until issues around poverty and inequality in housing are addressed, and so that's part of the architecture for a renewable economy, is the government needs to be investing in that, the social and cultural pieces that are critical to enable a sustainable economy and make that gardening possible, make that ground fertile for that entrepreneurship to grow.
And that, I think, that's a kind of a virtuous circle as opposed to a vicious circle. The data shows that smaller local businesses deliver better outcomes in terms of jobs, poverty reduction, and local economic stimulus too. So there's the sort of downsides of an export-oriented boom economy in terms of the social impacts, the impacts on inequality, and you can see that as yes, it provides jobs to some people. Some people don't get jobs. Inflation happens. Prices go up because some people have a lot of money. And I understand from, I think it was the survey, that the top 20% here versus the lowest 20% here in terms of income in the territories are it's the biggest gap in Canada. So I think there's room for the local economy to help bring the people at the bottom up. And in terms of taxation, as Di mentioned quickly, there's room for more progressive taxes. And the majority of provinces in Canada have actually added extra brackets at the top of their scale of tax brackets and increased taxation on the highest income people, all in the last 5 years. It's enormously satisfying to have worked on that particular issue for several years now and to see it starting to have traction. For those of you who read the reports that came out from Alternatives North and UNW and Parkland Institute around the NWT budgets about 5-6 years ago, that's the type of policy change that was being discussed then. So it's to see it happening in a lot of places.
I think we need to wrap up, don't we?
Well, let's talk about the political, or open up, I guess.
Yeah. The last thing we were going to talk about is political. I think it's been talked about already.
Yeah.
And certainly Chief Erasmus talked about sort of the change coming from Alberta in terms of what we call it, waking up the gorilla.
Yeah, waking up the 800-pound gorilla. I mean, I think that business and political elites count on the public to be sleeping, right? And they count on 60% of Alberta voters to not be voting. And you can see that the big gorilla occasionally wakes up and throws the master out. And it's quite interesting. It's interesting to realize that there is no such thing as political certainty. Because if there was ever a political truth in Canada, up until a few weeks ago, it was that Alberta was always going to be voting in conservative governments, whether it's called PCs or Wild Rose. But no, actually the most right-wing province, if you believe the mainstream media, voted in the most left-wing party. So there's no political certainties. I would say that's one of the political trends. The other that Di mentioned was the shifting values of Canadians. I mean, Canadians, like people all over the world, I think, are more attuned to the 1% versus 99% issue than they have been since maybe the 1960s. And that's a big thing to pay attention to. That may go a ways towards explaining what happened in Alberta. It's maybe not just people who are angry with corruption. It may be that people who think we actually need some change in our policies have decided, well, maybe I'll try voting this time because it won't be a waste of time. And now, I wonder what's going to happen in the next election when you've got a lot of people in Alberta who realized, my God, we can actually make change through voting. It's shocking.
The other thing that I think is a nice place for us to wrap up on is that the public opinion polling shows that the public supports more sustainable options. It supports raising revenues to support sustainable options and reduce inequality. There's public support for raising corporate taxes. That's a place where the NWT does have revenue room. So certainly there's a conversation to be had about shifting funding in the current budget in terms of what's being prioritized and leveling that playing field. But there's also reality that there are revenues needed to invest in the architecture and social infrastructure for that renewable economy, that sustainable economy. Whether that's in culture, whether that's in harvesting, or if it's in tourism, whatever the conservation economy, that to build that is going to need investment. And so some of that is about readjusting what's being spent on, and some of that is about having a government that's able to maximize revenues needed to ensure that poverty isn't a barrier to entrepreneurship and to sustainable economies. That the infrastructure there was lots of infrastructure identified as gaps in this survey, in this fantastic survey that was done, like childcare, housing, support for innovation, integration of service providers, poverty, hunger, housing. So to address these is going to take resources, and it needs to be done. And there's really great studies that have been done about what attracts people and investors to a place. There's this great study I saw in the US about why CEOs locate their businesses somewhere. And it was a list, and it included taxes, and of course everyone would assume taxes are way at the top. They were below the location of the CEO's mother-in-law. Now, I'm not sure if that was a positive or a negative correlation, but just to tell you that location decisions of individuals and companies are complicated and driven by quality of life. They're driven by things like health services, by things like the environment, by things like culture, community cohesion, and that social capital needs to be there to retain. And we heard earlier in the conversation that the population's been on the decline from despite GDP growth. And so that's a fundamental thing for this conference to grapple with, is how do you make these communities places that at least retain the people that are there and that attract people to start to build diverse, sustainable local economies. And I think that's going to be one of the fundamental conversations.
It's a great note to end on, and I would love to hear some other voices than ours.
On food sustainability, are you familiar with the Jardin Botanica Gardens of Montreal that are using rooftops for year-round greenhouses? And I think 2,000 square feet are able to feed 2,000 people per week.
Yeah, so there you go, rooftop gardening in Montreal.
Maybe one of them.
Yeah, but I have heard that they're doing amazing things in terms of
And
food.
he's got a hydroponic solution for growing vegetables, and everybody laughed at this young person when he tried to get the
Bee harvesting, and or not bee harvesting, but bee growing on rooftops is another part of that's been really growing. I think we should let some other folks talk that haven't yet, if there's some
So
folks.
just to let you know, they're asking, as far as the webcast is concerned, if you can use this microphone.
Yeah, so we've got a lady back here.
And pass it.
Oh, it's actually okay. That captures my moment, so.
That was, I just wondered is it on?
Yep.
I just wondered if people could throw out something. You mentioned co-ops and social enterprise. There's probably people in the room that have examples, and including yourselves, even though maybe hard of talking. But I just wanted to share one example of a social enterprise. I just moved here from BC, from Hazelton, BC, which is just 5,000 people. And a group of people locally decided that they wanted to create a business that could employ people that have problems being employed. And so they started a bakery. And it's been incredibly successful. Skeena Bakery, you might be able to Google it or something. And it's not like it cost a ton of money, and they have been so successful that I'm pretty sure that they're in the black by this point a few years down the line. So that's just one example.
Can I ask about that? Can I ask some more about that?
Well, I'll try and answer, but I don't
I'm just
know.
wondering what made that business successful? Like, is it because it's local and people can see the results of it, or what do you think?
I think
It's
it's
just
a
good
mix.
bread.
I think it's a mixture of things, including the level of commitment of the group of people that got it going. Like, there's just really passionate people, but I see that here already. So, so that's one piece of it. And they did have trouble getting funding, so it would be interesting. Yeah. And so that's still a problem. Like, even Community Futures, I think I was told that they didn't fund them. So I'm not sure about the details there. But anyway, and the other piece of it was that it just so happened that this person from Vancouver Island moved, and he was an artisan. He had a bakery he sold there. And so he was an artisan bread expert, and he volunteered to train people. So, I mean, there's some pieces of luck, or whatever you want to call that, there too. But then you get a good product and a need for it. There is a need for it, and the product's delicious. It's a social place. Everything, it just all came together. So it's just one of them. But there's lots of examples of that. And co-ops, I'd love you to talk about co-ops too.
Well, for many of our communities that are fly-in communities or isolated communities, the idea of bakery, I think, is one that could reduce costs too, because the cost of shipping in bread by airplane is pretty high, and that would be one thing that we could encourage through even through that Nutrition North program, where instead of subsidizing food, we encourage people to create their own food, as in bakeries, because everybody has skills. Throughout every community, there's people with skills about making bread. I mean, that's common. But if you can look at our 33 communities and count how many places there are actually where people have bakeries, pretty low. Because people haven't taken it from, and Bill, you spoke to that. People need to take it from this level and put it up here, where they can get the entrepreneurial and the micro investment required to bring it up there. I think that's something that is key to some of this stuff. We're not doing enough of that. I mean, there's going to be failures at that, but there's going to be some success too. You got to have programs that allow for failure too. You can't just expect everything to work out perfectly.
I was going to say one more example of cost saving as far as energy is concerned. For instance, in Port Simpson, we spend $30 million a year on heating fuel, and if we were using geothermal power, because it's readily available there, we would reduce our oil bill by $30 million a year to go into the economy. That's a lot of money. And it might take 30 or 40 million to build the power plant and do all the drilling and get it into place, and then hire local people to maintain the plant. But then after the first year, we don't have to keep giving $40 million every year to the oil company. So that's another way, like the more sustainable communities get, then more the cost savings, the cost of living really goes down. Just like producing all your own food, you reduce the cost by 80 or 90%.
Well, the energy things, we're going to get into that a lot, but I have to say that our territory here has been pretty successful with the biomass conversions. And we have a lot of people that heat with wood as well. The beauty of heating with wood is it's tax-free. You don't pay taxes on the wood that you harvest. You just take it, and that's a huge advantage that people don't even factor into the equation when it comes to the difference in price between oil and wood. I mean, so, you know, your point is good about geothermal, but it's a big capital investment, and is it gonna get people out in the forest where they may do other things?
Well, that is another avenue of approach. I think we've got to use, like, there's all different kinds of forms of energy we can use, but one thing we could do is, like, go into the wood pellet, make wood pellet because it's super efficient. And there's lots of burnt up areas where we get the wood, we could actually create jobs in various communities by opening up wood pellet plants. And everybody can really go into wood pellet stoves. You don't have geothermal, and that could be done with not as much capital cost.
On the wood belt, so somebody here in town mentioned maybe would rather even give the stoves to certain people, and then once your wood pellet stove is industry's created, and there's some very inexpensive wood pellet stove converters that will take the biomass and convert it into pellets. I think he was talking of a portable unit for 50, 60 grand. But I don't know yet. I can research that. So you give the person the stove, and then.
I think this discussion will take place pretty well tomorrow. The session we have is going to be it's a pretty important session. I mean, that is, you talk about import replacement and you talk about fuel oil, you're talking about ways of really creating a lot of opportunity out here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I think it's, Jack, $500 million worth of fuel oil every year that comes in the Northwest Territories. You know, you can talk about a lot of jobs attached to that, a lot of businesses, a lot of opportunities.
I know we haven't talked a lot, the topics that are going to be covered in the conference include food, fuel, so we haven't talked a lot about food, but did you have a comment?
Food. I remember when I first came here, there in the last century, and there was some farms here, and that was all changed in our government policy. And it's crazy that we're not getting back into farming. The soil is there, the climate is there, and it seems to me that it's an industry that is just waiting to happen. Agriculture.
What was the government policy change?
It had to do with land use. They stopped giving out farm leases, as far as I know. When Dennis was on
So I can expand on that a little bit. In 71, or in the 1970s, Fort Providence was producing enough potatoes to feed half of Canada, but because it was interfering with the potato market for New Brunswick, the province of New Brunswick, they outlawed farming in the Northwest Territories. In fact, one of the farmers in Fort Providence took 2 bales of hay up to the commissioner's office, because that time we didn't have a legislative assembly, and stuck it on the 6th floor. But it was really crazy, because they just allowed farming altogether. You couldn't farm here.
there was just to add to that, there was an experimental farm, as you know, in Fort Simpson for many years. I think it closed in 56 or 50s. And they showed that 60-day vegetables were no problem, because you had the long sun, and the soil is river bottom soil, and it was a no-brainer.
Well, they even have fruit there. They even grew fruit.
And I think that actually happened, to some degree throughout the Northwest Territories. I mean, residential schools would sometimes slave labor, but most people were growing their own food. So with today's technology and doing it on a different basis, I think the potential is huge for that. Now, there's an agricultural policy strategy statement. You'll appreciate this, under development as we speak. I believe there's a public consultation on that. Does anybody know the date? Within a few days.
Next May 26th is the Yellowknife session. But
Yellowknife
they've been
session.
throughout the valley.
Yeah. Good. So I encourage people to, bring these thoughts forward. Now, there's also, Canada's just been put on the map for our farming with the Hay River operation. We're going to hear a lot about during the session here. And we've become a Savory Institute, which is the criminal apparently of speakers is going to ride back from Zimbabwe, of all places, where she's doing some training on that. The day before she speaks, she's probably in route now. But anyway, so I think there are some real things happening on the agricultural front to try and reverse it.
But there's geodesic clean room technologies, and we'll talk about that tomorrow, where we can extend the growing season all year round.
Absolutely.
And there's vertical farming that they're using in the United States and all major cities. They're taking these old derelict buildings, and they're doing things with hydroponic, they're growing things like crazy.
Yeah, and this, the Northern Farm Training Institute in Muir is into that stuff. I mean, I know Chief Bill would remember having grown up, roughly the same time as me, young guy, but, some of the, market gardens we had here, some of those, see the old films, they, with pretty amazing projects.
Huge
At the back there, sir.
Yeah, I missed most of it here this evening. My voice is a little hoarse, so excuse me. My name's Doug Whiteman. I've been over in the wells, just kind of playing with experimental farming. Not playing, but actually blood, sweat, and tears out of it. I'm not a farmer, but I'll tell you what I've done. In a few years, one particular year that was probably the best, from the May until September season, or say October, because that's when I butchered my pigs, I had 30,000 pounds of potatoes harvested. I did dressed out half a dozen 35-pound turkeys dressed out. That's not live weight, that was dressed out. 150 meat birds, like roosters. They were going 5 to 6 pounds. So it's not that you can't do it. You can do it. You just got to knuckle down and do it. Hope you've got a lot of friends or other families that are interested to help share the workload. So I'm going to be talking about it some tomorrow, and hope that there's some interest in it.
Have you learned a lot of lessons about how to maximize your work potential?
My work for they're older, so you have a number of grandchildren because they just love it. I love grandchildren, I don't know where I can, and my own children, of course, they're wonderful to help me out. The wife is there for support, but not so much bending over and getting down and attitude. But and I'm not a farmer. I come from an area where there was subsistence farming, and at a time when everybody had their own house, their kitchen garden, and that type of thing. So I had the background of not knowing how to grow things and working with some stock and things like that. But I'm not a farmer, and I did that. So imagine what an actual farmer could do in this part of the country.
I have a question for you. When you said community and people to help out, is that something that you felt was really a big part of your success? Is that the community and participation?
Well, not so much where we are right now in the wells, because everybody makes good paychecks there, but there's communities around us that don't have paychecks. And what I thought at first when I was doing this, that maybe a person could make a business out of it. I've got no doubt you probably could, but you have to overcome the storage of these type of things, long-term storage of the produce and the meat that you're putting up, that you're harvesting, and you also have to beat that transportation problem that we have. We're in an isolated area where we have the winter roads and river and air transport, which is pretty expensive. So, but what I promote to people is a community agricultural co-op where you get a number of families together that are willing to hold the burden of doing this, and you share that bounty at the end of the season and whatever's left, you market throughout the winter to people in the community at a cost that's reasonable for them.
So you can take away the prohibitive costs in terms of transportation and stuff like that drive high prices for those communities.
The earliest I've ever had anything harvested, like in potatoes, was some Red Orleans in the middle of August. Took out 1,200 pounds. At that time, in just a row and about a row and a quarter. And at that time at the store, they were just under $5 a pound. So I was selling them for $2 a pound. That was fine with me. That's a big difference for people. And we deliver door to door. We learned a lot about how to get to people too. We started selling 100-pound bags, and people couldn't store them. They would dry out in the houses. So we got down to 10-pound bags, and we delivered them door to door. We take orders during the week, and my grandson, my son, and I would deliver them on the weekend, and get it all done in a couple hours on a Saturday morning, and everybody'd have fresh potatoes each week.
Did they put it back in the store?
Actually, the store helped me market them to the northern store. But the trouble with them is they're storing them under fluorescent lights. They're in open bins, and we're turning green. So what I had was a good product when I gave it to them. A week later, I had to go take it back. It just, what they had sold, I took back because it just wasn't, I didn't want to see that happening to us. But a lot of people like it because it's like what we do there, because the ground is pretty much virgin soil, so you don't have to worry about any big buildup of any contaminants that are there. It's along a little grass airstrip towards DOT Light, both sides of the airstrip. We don't use herbicides, we don't use pesticides, and people, even though last year with that Healthy Foods Initiative, that really kicked us in the butt because they were putting American potatoes on the shelves in Northern Wells for $15 a 10-pound bag, and I was selling for 20 and getting by, but I had to bite the bullet. When I did that crop, I had no choice but to do it the same price as what the store was selling, which was subsidized through the Healthy Foods Initiative. So that really kind of burned me a little bit, and I just let the field lie fallow last year because I was having a lot of trouble with weeds and I wanted to till it down. And but I still brought in 10,000 pounds of potatoes from Manitoba and Alberta, and 500 pounds of onions, and I marketed them right through the first part of March, I guess it was, before they were getting a little bit too poor quality to compete. So I'll talk about it tomorrow if there's people interested, that's for sure.
There's something for the agricultural policy. Incenting local over import.
Yeah, I'd also like to say something about politics and politicians, and I think one of the problems is, well, it has to do with the people too. We have to be more, I think we have to become more like human beings. It's a matter of spirituality. But I'd say the majority of the politicians right now have kind of, their mindset is in the industrial revolution mode. You know, they're thinking back in the terms of, having to have a big industrial revolution, large companies and big governments. Now we've got to go back, because the world is the way it is, we've got to go back to being globalized.
That's interesting. Some people think about this sort of localized or return to something traditional, but the reality is that there's been parallel economies of sort of large-scale industrial and small-scale local all along. And it's not new, it's not old, it's not back to the history, it's a parallel and alternative path that's always been there. It's historical and it's current. And it's really important not to think that we're going backwards, but that we're recognizing and building on diversity. And it isn't always either or either, it's about balance and identifying and building that diversity. So just on that note around big versus small, I read this great study, and it was done by a conference board in Atlanta, or a business association in Atlanta, but they looked at all the way across the United States at business at size and employment, and they questioned, does business size matter and local? Does it matter if it's local or big or small for employment generation, poverty alleviation, economic stimulus, and quality of life? And the study found that there was a direct correlation between smaller local businesses and higher employment, poverty alleviation, economic stimulus, and quality of life. So that actually across a big metadata analysis, smaller delivers better. Smaller and local delivers better. And there's a study in BC, Center for Civic Economics, I think, did one in BC and one in Atlanta that found that a local restaurant, locally owned restaurant, will deliver twice the economic activity as a same-sized chain restaurant. So just in terms of, and I mean, look at something like, I don't know if it's Starbucks here, because I haven't had the cafes yet, but something like that, like a chain restaurant, they bring stuff in. They don't even buy local bakery product. They ship in baked goods. It's absurd. But the difference between, and they did the same for a local retail outlet. If it's a locally owned versus a chain retail outlet, it's more than double the stimulus as a chain. So it does matter if it's locally owned in terms of what they're spending their money on. The owners are buying and procuring services and stuff locally in a way that a branch or a chain or a foreign or a non-locally owned or subsidiary of a larger business isn't going to be doing. And so it does matter to build local economies, and I think it was mentioned early on, I think it was Keith Erasmus that mentioned building a better and stronger and better quality life in Yellowknife is good for the regional and local communities, but better, stronger, and healthier local communities is better for Yellowknife. And that's true not just from a quality of life perspective, but local economies are good for the economy in a more general sense, in terms of jobs, poverty dollars.
You know, we found with, especially with the potatoes, that industry really stands by us. Like, we have a lot of work camps over there, 80, 100-man camps. The restaurants, they're probably account for 60% of our sales, with the other, maybe even 70%, but the 30 to 40 going within the community surrounding us as personal sales, like to just the individuals. But the camps and restaurants want them 300 pounds a week, and it's just great to have a customer like that. It really is your anchor that can keep something like that going. So you just make sure you grow enough for everybody that you have sale for.
There's a similar thing I got talking to the fishermen in Hay River that are processing their own fish now. I mean, their best customer is the guys that are running the Aurora Visit. He says, I mean, I'm selling thousands of dollars of processed flash frozen fish to these guys in big orders. And yeah, so that is something that that I think should be discussed, is how do we create better markets for local products. But the fish guys say exactly the same thing, that their best customers are right now the large-scale tourist industry. They're buying the fish by the thousands of dollars.
Well, these big customers tell me that they like it because when they order from the south, they're not sure just what potatoes they're getting, although they're told it's going to be this size, so they don't know what it was grown in. If it comes frozen, they can't do anything with it other than throw it away and order again. Now they're in a waiting game to try to get the new order up. And I'm not going to deliver frozen potatoes to anybody in town. If they're getting where they're not going to be marketable, I'm just not going to market them. I give the people a heads up within 2 weeks there won't be any more potatoes available. So, and they like that they know what they're going to get when it comes to the door. And we take it right to the storage area for them. So saves them a lot of work having to go to the airport at the hourly times to pick up these things and so on and so forth. I don't want to give it all away tonight, though.
Yeah, we should probably wrap up because this is supposed to be a teaser and not the whole conference. So
Constituency meeting as well. So if anybody has anything else,
we should let it wrap up. But I know that food and energy and a bunch of these issues we're going to dive in for the next 2 days. Are you guys both there for the next couple of days?
I just have a really short one. I didn't mean to blame the politicians because I think it's the people's fault because we're not participating with the government. And so having something like this is really fantastic. Like when I read it in Dennis's letter, I thought that was really good. That's what we need, is more of a dialogue and have the politicians, come to the communities to discuss these things. And that's what we really need, is have interaction more with our MLAs. And I know they're really busy sometimes, but they've got to make the time to have a consultation. And people do have to make more of an effort to like when we have constituency meetings in Fort Simpson, sometimes only 2 or 3 people will show up. So how is Kevin, going to tell what the people want? People don't come and participate in these things and say it's on the money.
Well, that's very true, and that's one of the reasons why Ecology North has invested a lot of effort and money into creating this website and the webcast, because all of this will be available for anyone to listen to in the future. Make sure I got that right. But so even if people want to connect with any of the dialogues that are going to go on for the next 2 days, if they can't do it right now, they can do it later on the web. Because we do need to, we couldn't afford to bring everybody here that wanted to come to this conference. All the people that did the survey, there were so many people that wanted to come here. Well, we couldn't, this is the first conference like this, maybe in the future a bit more. But when you think about it, this webcasting is the modern tool to communicate. And even at the House of Commons, we don't bring witnesses in half as much as we used to. Most of the people come on video conferencing from all over Canada. And what a treat for them. They don't have to get in an airplane and fly 3,000 miles to give 15 minutes worth of testimony in front of Parliament. They just, on the video cam and go home afterwards. I mean, that is that modern technology opportunity that we need to really encourage. And our young people all do this. So I mean, it's, yeah, we're used to sitting in meetings all night. I mean, I've done this all my life, but the young people, they want to, you know, get some of this over with a little easier and get on to something else. Maybe actually put some work.
Have some kind of action after the meeting, so like I hope that they start some kind of action groups in the communities during those 2 days.
On that point, not to insult anyone, but where are the younger people? It's their future. I know. Bring friends. It's their future.
Well,
I know that there's a possibility of getting.
Yeah, well, you know, this is a start, and we just have to keep at it. I mean, it is the future for the young people, and there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I just want to mention too, Dennis, that, you know, the comment that there's only 2 or 3 people at a constituency meeting is true. It's a real opportunity for you to bend the ear of your politicians. And also on Monday, except yours, you've got a lot of people here. I also appreciated this discussion on the small versus large businesses and the various local and not impact. But I think it'd be great to get that reference and delve into that a little bit. At the beginning of the presentation, we heard about the impact on the commons. And that's one thing I haven't heard discussed much tonight, but I'm pleased to say that I see on the agenda that there's a whole session dedicated to that discussion of the impacts on the commons, our current air, our water, our environment, and our soil, and so because I think that's something that I don't know whether that study Diana commented on, but impact on the commons, small and medium versus.
It talks about quality of life, but I'm not sure exactly what they used as indicators for that.
Yeah.
So I'd have to see how much they focused on environment.
But today, I'm seeing a very large part of it and increasing. I've been at College for just about 8 years, and I've seen amazing increase in what we spend on the impact of climate change. People look the gaping hole on the runway at Inuvik that was just repaired last year. We thought in the spring and so on. We've had to redesign our schools, the snow roads, and we got flooded out, our highways and so on. So I think we need to bring that into the equation, obviously, and that's a real opportunity to reveal how those small local economies can do things to impact on the world. So a focus on supporting the life systems that support us, the opportunity for the economy. Thanks, great discussion.
Yeah.
Hi, Dennis. Just want to say I'm one of those few 2 or 3 people that show up to my MLA's constituency. So it was fun coming to this one. I think this is the most I've seen in any of yours that you've had done, except for one in the Oaks Hall.
Yeah, C38.
As a lifelong Yellowknifer and Northerner, I've had well over half a century worth of observations of change. And I'd just like to say that this forum is coming up over the next couple of days. It's long overdue, and it's really, really good to see it. For years, our territory has been built on resource development, and that's living with what we've got. There was a necessity there, and it still will be a necessity. And I'll read you a quote in a second from the study, which I think is particularly poignant. But we desperately need viable diversification. And we've tried our hand at numerous things over the years, everything from arts and crafts to tourism to all sorts of different things, none of which have replaced the revenue from the resource development. So to have a forum like what we're getting tomorrow and the next day is really good. I just wanted to make a couple of comments though, food for thought, particularly about the vertical gardening and the geothermal. We've got an excellent thing that we could do right here. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do with the con head frame. Well, we've got a source of hydrothermal underneath there, and we've got a great vertical shelter there, so maybe there's the solution to save the economy. But just in keeping with that, there was a big versus little example where there was the city put forward a plan to do hydrothermal, bringing it from the con shaft to feed it into large downtown core buildings, and it proved unviable for a number of different reasons. One, it cools off pretty quickly when you try and put it in pipes in the ground, and it was a horrible cost because we'd had to dig up all the ground as we do with the water and sewer here, put it in the ground, etc. At least 3 of the buildings that I'm aware of that were proposed to be fed by that hydrothermal have since been fed by biomass. They're all burning pellets, and some of them with some pretty sleeper systems that have reduced their costs substantially. So there's, within walking distance, there's excellent examples of big versus little if you want. The other quick point I wanted to make is this gentleman's incredulity over the Norwegian size of the Norwegian Heritage Fund. What's even more incredulous is the fact that the Norwegian government, and this pertains to your statement on politics over there, has since put the whole darn thing into hot. They've mortgaged that Heritage Fund, and their payments on the mortgage debt that they've got are more than the interest that's generated by the fund. So as much as we try and do good things with our resource revenue or whatever, we have to be careful with what our politicians do with all of that, right? And we're only, despite a round of sessions where a number of people called for way more than what our government is now currently putting into our brand new dinky Heritage Fund, it should have been 100%. But I think we're putting in some minuscule little thing like 10 or 15% or 5 or whatever, right? Okay, so as we try and grow ours, we have to pay attention to what's happening at the political level to make sure that's going. But I think one of the most poignant things that we have to think about is and this is a comment from one of the respondents in the surveys in section 6 on page 10. The huge cost of developing renewable energy, makes short, medium-term dependence on fossil fuels hard to break. No government will stand if it taxes fossil fuels to the extent needed to give renewable energy a leg up. So there's a conundrum that we're going to have to tackle right at the very beginning if we're going to be able to make diversity work. So not all of us, some of us actually have to go to work tomorrow elsewhere, but we're close by, so we'll be nipping in to see what's going on. Saturday, we've all got tour day, so we'll try and get by, but I'm really happy to see this forum taking place. This discussion really needs to happen, and the more the better. Thanks.
Can I just throw answer to that 1 second, just the subsidy issue? Like when you said what fossil fuel subsidies could be used for, you had a whole list of things, but you didn't mention alternative energy. So that's just to link in there.
That's true. That's true. And I'll just add a little 2 cents. In BC, with the carbon tax there, the sky didn't fall and the government did stand. So, and what they have put their money into, it's not a perfect system by any stretch, but they have put it into basically cash payments, tax reductions, that sort of thing. But you're right, those types of alternative investments are possible, and I think they can make it more popular. If you can tie the reason people are paying a tax to something that they really care about, whether it's sustainable energy or transit or local economies, you can make it a lot more popular. Go ahead.
It's interesting to hear this contrast with large producers or economic models and small. We're going to participate as an observation of running an entrepreneurial business, for 20 years, and going from an entrepreneurial business to a workers' cooperative type of structure. The whole thing I've seen in the last 10 years in momentum growing, where all these things you're talking about, a combination of local economic activity of we're producing the product, and the combination of that with tourism, and the two of them have really had an impact. And then that, in our meeting environment, the restaurant across the street, we got the statewide back and forth. And the last 10 years, we've been working with Randy Roy, creating the persona of Old Town being a tourist destination, because 10 or 15 years ago, the majority of the elders did not see Old Town as a tourist destination. It was a place with ugly buildings that should be demolished. This was a monument valley of City Hall, which has changed with the changing of the guard at City Hall. And that the whole idea of this microeconomic activity, and particularly in like Old Town becoming a tourist and a destination for arts activities, and getting, now there's more and more artists being drawn to Old Town, so there's more and more synergy going. And a number of times I've heard of go to Whitehorse and look at what they're doing, is just echo again and again. So, and now it's, I think like this summer, when the summer's coming, we're at that tipping point. I've always heard of this thing called tipping point, I didn't know what it felt like. And now it's, our business had exponential growth for 6 years in a row. So and partly the staff, we're trying to find a way to retain our staff, and we went to a workers cooperative model, and people are coming back and saying, I just came back from Thailand because I want to work for their business, because they like the worker cooperative structure, the model structure. Not that it's perfect, it's just the imagination, but it's a lot more desirable than some of the other ones.
It's interesting that you mentioned that trade and that synergy, because that's one of the things that they found in that local businesses do build stronger local trade relationships, so they support other local businesses in a way that the chains didn't. So that trade relationships, sort of informal trade and cooperation, was stronger with the local businesses.
I just have one last quick comment. Germany, the state of Germany, or the country of Germany, is going to eliminate fossil fuels and nuclear power by 2022. And if they can do it, we can do it. And I'm sure.
Well, we're going to hear a lot about that tomorrow.
And their economy is growing, really growing.
Lots of opportunities.
So they don't have to.
Is there any mention of medical sustainability? Because we're getting more and more health stories coming out of our hospitals, and growing Alzheimer, that's there. Is that going to be mentioned anyway?
Well, are you talking about the next
in the
2 days?
conference? There is some conversation around sort of sustainable community infrastructure and stuff like that, but I think it is an important part of local economies, for sure. Hopefully, I can certainly touch on it a little bit in my talk.
I've got one more here, and then we.
This is a question as the constituency meeting participant rather than the forum. Totally different topic. Is that okay?
As long as you stay away from one issue.
Oh, okay. Oh, not the F word. No, I'd like to ask Dennis if you would commit to your party in the next federal election to really pushing for a reform of our electoral system so that everyone's vote actually counts, i.e. representative democracy.
Well, I am totally in favor of proportional representation, especially since the last 4 or 5 years I worked with the other Arctic nations who have proportional representation, and I see what it does to them as politicians. It turns them from confrontational beasts into cooperative people. Regardless, you can sit with these people who are of different stripes, but they will be always trying to get something together. It's completely different. And that's my experience now, and I'd say that the proportional representation is really important in this country, because we have this parliament that was designed so there was 2 sword lengths apart, in the middle, and you have one group on one side and then you have the government on the other side. In European parliaments, they don't sit by party, they sit by regions. So even in their own parliament, you don't have this sort of differentiation between one group or the other. You're just all, you're all citizens of the country, and you're all supposed to be there to make the country better. That's what your goal is, not to create a situation where your personal goals are the highest thing that you're worried about. Getting yourself reelected is the highest thing you're worried about. No, you have to actually have a sense of community. And proportional representation also means that the pressure is off the individual because they're on a list. They're on a list of people that are going to get elected. So that the majority of people that are in that parliament are not that concerned about getting reelected because they're on a list. So they don't have to fight this stupid battle that we do in Canada. This insanity which is our parliamentary system. And that's my view about it. It's you know, just look at where people are going. Yes, you can have the Israeli model where there's too many, too much. But surely as Canadians we can come up with a solution that's uniquely Canadian for proportional representation that'll give us the good things that we want and avoid some of the pitfalls that other systems have taken on. But the whole idea is to make people cooperative. This is rather than confrontational, because we're really that's really a losing game, being confrontational in your own country. It's where we can't get an energy policy in Canada because nobody can. You know, when I was first in Parliament, I met this conservative Danish Minister of Energy, and I said to him, "Well, you've got this great energy policy." He said, "Yeah, every single party agreed on that. We all agreed that was the only way that we could get it done. Everybody agreed, and we stick to it." And so then they've accomplished amazing things. Here, we can't have an energy policy because if one party proposes it and it's successful, the other party's going to want to tear it down. You know, so you're in this crazy world that is divorced from the reality of your country and what should go ahead and what should be there, and you're in this, and so. Is that enough of an answer, or do you want me to go on?
It wasn't ambiguous.
Yeah, the non-proportional representation actually worked for the NDP in Alberta this last time.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit worried that, you know, as a party platform, they might say, well, you know, maybe
Well,
for us, we want to keep it. Or,
yeah.
It's what's happened in other cases. I haven't seen, I don't know how firm they were on it before they even went in. I was pushing it for sure. I was pushing for them when they were in opposition to do, with Wild Rose, to do a form an alliance with Wild Rose to defeat the PCs on the basis of implementing PR and then dissolving government. And Wild Rose probably would have said no, but because Wild Rose stands for grassroots democracy and transparency, if you put that on the table saying, we are willing to do this, if the NDs had, Wild Rose had said no, they would have lost their base. So you could have called them out. So it was a win-win either way for the NDP to have done it, but they didn't. I was pushing really hard, but it didn't. But so I don't know how firm they were going in on PR in Alberta, but I haven't heard them talk about it yet. But there's certainly a grassroots movement in Alberta to push for it that's been pretty strong in the progressive movement. So hopefully that pressure will stay on.
Thank you. I told you it was completely different topic.
Very well. Thank you everyone for coming out today.
Thank you, Dennis, for